Hello, welcome to Ask the Expert, an award-winning daily series from 8:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. to help small businesses. If you've got any questions, ask them in the comments of the live feed. If you need any more advice, then join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. Accountants and business experts are on hand 24/7. During the live session, we will be running a poll, so please do engage with it, and I'll reveal the results at the end. Hello there, I'm Toby Mildon. I'm a diversity and inclusion consultant. I work with heads of HR and senior business leaders to help them create diverse workplaces and inclusive work cultures where everybody can thrive. I'm the author of the Inclusive Growth book and also the host of the Inclusive Growth podcast show. I've been working with a fintech business recently to help them create their diversity and inclusion strategy, along with an electricity company based in the north of the UK and a global NGO as well. So what I wanted to talk to you about today was the topic of racism. It's something that my clients have been talking a lot to me about recently. It's obviously been an issue for a very long time, but my clients feel that it's really come to the forefront of conversation in businesses in the last 18 months to 2 years or so, for a number of reasons. So last year we saw the murder of George Floyd in the States and other cases of police brutality. And then also we saw the increase of momentum around the Black Lives Matter movement as well, and how that has sparked a lot of conversation here in the UK. But also we've seen the impact of the coronavirus on people in society as well. Not only has it had an impact on people of an ethnic minority background, we've seen that the coronavirus has had a disproportionate impact on women in the workforce, working parents in the workforce, people who are disabled or have long-term health conditions as well. So this has obviously sparked a lot of debate amongst a lot of my clients around, what is the role of organizations or employers in addressing racism within society in the workplace, and it kind of re-emerged as well a couple of weeks ago after the European final football match as well. So the racism that we saw happening online towards the 3 black football players who missed penalties at the end of the game, and then the kind of what's happened in society as a result as well. I always say, and this is a comment that I make in my book as well, that employers have a really important role in society in addressing inequalities that we see, and making sure that they create workplaces, whether you're a small organization employing 3 people or you're a large organization employing 30,000 people. It's still really important that as an employer, as a senior business leader, that you create an environment within your organization where people feel that they belong, people feel empowered, people feel that they can progress in their careers, and people feel that respected for who they are. And it has a ripple effect, because the conversations that you have within your business will start to kind of go back to people's houses. So if you talk about, for example, racism and anti-racism in your workplace, or if you talk about other topics around gender equality or disability inclusion, for instance, people will go home and they will talk to their families about that around the dinner table, and it does have a ripple effect through society. But I wrote a blog post just after the European final football match, because I was really angry about the racism that was levelled at the 3 black players following the match. And it got me thinking, or my colleagues were asking, so, what are the things that we can do to become an anti-racist or be an anti-racist organisation or employer. And I spoke to a lot of my colleagues as well in trying to think about, what are the practical steps that they can take. And I was really angry because I could see that the football match itself was having a really profound impact on, Black friends and Black colleagues that I've got in my network. I had friends and colleagues who were anticipating the racism following the football match. If those football players did miss the penalties, they kind of anticipated that it was coming. And also, I had a couple of friends who didn't send their children to school the following day because they were really concerned about any abuse that their children might face just walking to school. And it made me really angry. And the work that I do is with employers. And so I was thinking, what is it that employers can do to really kind of become anti-racist organizations and have that ripple effect across society, as I said. So I wrote a blog post and I put 4 things in there. The first thing I said is that we need to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. Talking about racism can be a difficult and uncomfortable subject. I'll be the first to admit that I've been on a really steep learning curve about racism. I'm a white man born in the UK. I until I started working in the field of diversity and inclusion, I really didn't have a lot of experience or knowledge about racism or what it's like to be from an ethnic minority background living in the UK. So as a senior business leader or as a HR professional, we have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. We have to go out and learn about things like racism, or other isms that I refer to. But in this case, racism, you can do that by reading books. There's loads of really great books out there. One of my favorite books is, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race, for example. There's YouTube videos, TED Talks, blog posts, you name it. There's so many resources out there that you can read, watch, and listen to educate yourself. But then you have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, having those difficult conversations, perhaps with colleagues in your own business about their behavior that you might not be comfortable with, or perhaps talking to Black people in your organization about their lived experiences or what their day-to-day experience in your workplace is like. The second thing is that as a senior business leader, you need to take a stand. I was working with a client yesterday who said, we've got a 0 tolerance policy on racism in the organization, just like they would have a 0 tolerance policy on other forms of bullying and harassment and things like that. So it's really important that as a senior business leader, you have to say, this is something that we do not tolerate, and there's no wiggle room at all. Even if you're talking to star players or big money earners in your business, if they are not living respectful values of your organization, then they could be damaging the culture of your business and creating a toxic culture. And we've seen some really interesting headlines coming out recently, the BrewDog headlines around the culture of fear within the organization and how damaging that is for their reputation and their employer brand. But you have to take a stand. You have to make it very clear to your people that you do not tolerate racism, that you want to become an anti-racist or you want to work towards becoming an anti-racist organization. The third point that I made in my article is that you need to take active or proactive steps to support your Black staff. I talked to a number of my friends and colleagues who, the events around George Floyd's murder, the events around the Euro football finals was very triggering for them. It brought up past experiences of racism that they had experienced, and it was really affecting their self-esteem, mental health, and well-being. And you can only imagine that they might not be feeling particularly productive, in the office the following day. So you have to take proactive steps to support your staff, providing resources to help staff get support that they need. It might be that you have an employee assistance program, for example, and even small businesses can use employee assistance programs, because there are organizations out there that you can outsource that kind of support mechanism to. Or creating safe spaces for people to be able to raise their concerns, and creating or focusing on creating psychological safety within your organization, so that people can feel comfortable and able to speak up and call out behavior that it's not respectful. The final point that I made is that you need to have a plan. This is something that has to have concerted effort towards it. You have to have a plan in place, or you have to have a strategy. You might need to think about particular interventions or projects or activities that you need to roll out over a year. This isn't to be treated as a project. This has to become part of the culture of your organization. This has to become just part of the way that you do business. Just like you do health and safety every day, day to day, everybody knows their responsibilities around health and safety. Everybody knows how to call out health and safety risks or issues, or deal with incidents. It's the same around diversity and inclusion, or issues that we find around diversity and inclusion, like bullying, harassment, any kind of microaggressions, those small behaviors that are designed to undermine or demean somebody, which are often unintentional, but they can be, they can really damage people's self-esteem. But you have to have a plan so that you know what steps you're taking. So we're gonna go to questions. Please, by all means, send your questions through me. So we've got the first question here from Jasmine on Twitter. So Jasmine says, what's the best way to counter the kind of thinking that goes, we just hire or promote the best person of the job, regardless of race or gender? But it's a really interesting question, Jasmine, because it is important that when you are recruiting, that you do genuinely hire the best person for the job, regardless of their background, because you need to be careful that you're not positively discriminating. So that's something that you have to be very mindful of. But also, if you do hire somebody and they feel like they've been hired because of their particular background or characteristic, then they might end up working for you feeling like they are a kind of quote unquote diversity hire. Or, some of my clients I've spoken to have said they felt like they were just recruited to tick a box. And that's really unhelpful. It doesn't help them as an individual. It doesn't help the organization, who often, that's not the intention of the organization at all. I think that really the best way around this is to make sure that when you're recruiting, two things. First of all, that you make sure that when you're doing your talent attraction, when you're going out to market and you're trying to find people to apply to work for you, that you're casting your net as wide as possible. So that might mean just having a look at how you do your recruitment currently. Are there things in your recruitment process that mean that you're getting a lack of diversity? So do you kind of go to the same channels? Do you rely on kind of the personal networks of people in your organization? Because we know that, we have a similarity bias. We like to hang out with people that are just like ourselves, and we create in-groups and out-groups. So if you do rely on people's personal networks or LinkedIn networks, for example, you might not be tapping into a particularly diverse pool. So that's, first of all, are you getting diversity into the top of the recruitment process? The second thing is to think about is, in terms of the actual recruitment process, are you using objective measures so that you're able to objectively compare candidates from, between each other? So, are you, for example, setting a challenge and then giving every candidate that challenge, and then objectively assessing their response to that particular challenge? this is something I did in a previous job of mine when we were hiring software engineers. We would, before we even looked at their CV, we would give them a challenge and we would ask them to submit some code to us for this particular challenge. So we would say, we're developing this new feature, develop the code that sits behind this button, for example. And then we would look at the code, and then if we liked the work that they produce, then we would then look at their CV and call them in for interview. And it's really interesting because we saw an increase in women getting through to interview stage. We also saw an increase in people from ethnic minority backgrounds as well, getting through to interview stage. So that was a really good way of objectively, measuring a candidate as well. And that does help you kind of answer that question about the best person for the job, because you could say, that they were objectively measured, and then they were selected on that basis. Got another question here from Heather on Instagram. So Heather says, what should we be doing if we find out one of our employees posted discriminatory remarks in a private group chat outside of work? Cool. So that's a really interesting question, because obviously it's a private group chat. It's outside of work, so it's quite difficult for that to be within your control. I think there's a number of things. I think, first of all, it's worth having a conversation with that employee to find out what's going on, to find out, because if you've become aware that they've had that conversation or they've said remarks in a private chat group, and that's become into your awareness, I'm assuming that, you've heard through a colleague of yours, or maybe you were on that group, I'm not sure, but I'm assuming, you've become aware of that. So I think, depending on your relationship with that person, what part of the training that I do with my clients is kind of looking at the difference between calling out and calling in behavior. And I suppose you're in a situation of kind of calling out that behavior now that you've spotted it. And the thing is, there's different ways that you can call out behavior that you don't like, or you're not comfortable with, or doesn't marry up with your values as an organization, or any kind of employment policies, or that kind of thing. It could be that you just kind of schedule a private conversation with them, and you could say something, hey, I noticed that you made these remarks on this particular private group. I know it's a private group, but it has come into my awareness. So it has, as an employer, it's come into my awareness. Just so this is not the kind of behavior or opinions that we endorse in the organ as an employer. So maybe you should be careful going forwards about making these kind of remarks in a public space or something like that. It is a tricky one, I must admit. I'm struggling a bit to kind of give you a definitive answer. But I think it does need to be addressed. I think the other thing you need to think about is what should the organization be doing to kind of anticipate and protect yourself against these kind of things. So I don't know if you've already got it, but if you've got like a social media policy, it might be worth having a look at that policy to see if it includes things around, making particular remarks around, particular topics or issues, for instance, or what happens if they talk about you as an employer on social media, and they're not talking about you in a particularly favorable light, that kind of thing. So it's worth kind of trying to plan ahead and anticipate these kinds of things on social media as well. So got another question here from Rizwan on Facebook. So things like the racism the England team received makes me feel like we're going backwards as a country. do you think there's been progress in the fight against racism over the last 20 years? Um, yeah, I would have to agree with you. Like a couple of weeks ago after the football match, like I was really, really angry. And I did personally also feel like, you know, we've we're going backwards. You know, racism is has been something, you know, it's been around for hundreds of years. You know, there's a long history of, you know, racism in society globally. Um, and it's also, you know, it's a systemic issue as well. You know, it's really part of, you know, it's really systemically embedded in our society and our systems and things like that that need to be really addressed. And when we have these kind of events like the football a couple of weeks ago, like George Floyd last year, you know, it does make me feel like we've gone backwards. But then I get these like glimmers of hope. So, you know, there were loads of people that in Manchester kind of did a silent or quiet protest and gathered around Rashford's art kind of so I've got the word in my brain now. But yeah, the kind of the artwork in Manchester, putting kind of messages of encouragement and hope and things like that. And I just thought, you know, there are people out there who care about this, who want to address this. And I think, unfortunately, social media doesn't help us. I think, you know, a minority of, you know, racist individuals on social media, um, you know, amplify the situation. And, you know, arguably there's been debates over the last, well, I think this has been a debate that's going on for a long time about, you know, what is the role of these social media giants like Twitter and Facebook and YouTube in addressing issues like racism in society as well. I think if we were to kind of take, you know, the last 100 years, you know, I think, you know, things have progressed over the last 100 years, but there's still so much more work to do. And I think when I talk to a lot of my clients, one of their biggest kind of issues is that they are so frustrated about the pace of change that employees on the ground and on the front line feel like their organization isn't addressing problems quickly enough, or, you know, boldly enough, or that change is happening enough. Senior leaders, because I work with a lot of senior leaders, I work with chief executives and their direct reports, I work with heads of HR, they also feel that progress is not shifting quick enough as well. So I think we have to recognize that we are still on a journey and we have to just keep working at it. And the more people we can get on board is gonna help us. So Daniela on Twitter says, should organizations have a stance on things like taking the knee, or does that run the risk of being too political? Yeah, it's a really, really good question, Daniela. I've been asked this before, actually. There is a fear amongst some organizations that I talk to that if they follow a particular thing, like taking the knee, for example, that they are being political. But I think I would kind of challenge them a bit by that, by saying, what's wrong with being a bit political? I think there's a difference between, say, taking a political stance and aligning yourself against a particular political group, for instance, compared to what's going on in society. And you know, organizations are increasingly becoming aware, and this is something certainly for kind of younger people entering or in the workplace as well. They're becoming really aware of their responsibility in society and their impact on society. And it's not just around diversity and inclusion. They're also thinking about things like sustainability. They're thinking about things like the environment and climate change and things like that. So I think, first of all, as an organization, do you want to be a responsible organization with kind of particular ethics, a particular set of values around things like inclusion in society, um, the environment, global warming, climate change, that kind of thing? Because I think if you say as an organization that you want to be a responsible organization and you want to have a positive impact on society and you want to make a better working world for everybody, then I don't think there's anything wrong in kind of saying that you're going to be supporting that particular way of doing it. So yeah, Nathan on Facebook says, pay gaps have developed at my company because there wasn't a unified organizational approach to pay brackets, bonuses and rewards when we started. How do we go about remedying this? Yeah, really great question, Nathan. This often happens when you start calculating pay gaps. The calculation process in itself will start to show you why those gaps are existing. And I mean, that is a good thing. I think even if you don't employ 250 people, I think it's a good practice to be starting to calculate your gender pay gap reporting anyway, and also thinking about ethnicity pay gap reporting, which is something the government has been talking about for a while. But I think if you've calculated your pay gaps and it showed that you've got your pay brackets and your bonuses and your rewards, etc., are creating those gaps, that's a good thing. You can then start to develop a plan in your organization on how you can start to close the pay gaps. So looking at the bias that happens within the way that you calculate bonuses, the way that pay brackets are determined, and starting to re-engineer things. So it might be that you need to kind of look at your pay brackets to make sure that they're fairer, and things like that. So I think it's a good thing that you're onto, and the calculation process has kind of flagged that up for you. So the poll has just come in, or the results have come in. So the question that I asked you was, do you have an anti-racism plan? The answer was yes, no, or in progress. So the results are in. Nobody has got an anti-racism plan currently. 75% said that they don't have a plan, and 25% said that they're working on it. So it's kind of work in progress. So I would encourage anybody, if you don't have an anti-racism plan in your organization, then please do go back after this broadcast, have a conversation with your team about whether you should develop an anti-racism plan for your business. It doesn't have to be complicated. You can write it on a post-it note, but you basically need to write down the things that you're going to commit to doing over the next year, to create that anti-racism culture within your organization. So thank you ever so much for tuning in. If you'd like to get in touch with me, feel free to reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a message on LinkedIn, or go to my website, which is mildon.co.uk. Coming up on Ask the Expert tomorrow is Michelle Flynn. She's a certified mental health coach who helps people and businesses understand their health and happiness. Tune in to get advice on managing your mental health and mastering mindfulness. A reminder that if you need any more advice, then join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. Accountants and business experts are on hand 24/7. I've really enjoyed answering your questions this morning. Have a great day. Thank you.